I close my eyes and take a deep breath, the air heavy with memories that cling to me like a second skin. My name is Elaine Hartman, and I am 26 years old. I grew up in Springfield, Illinois, where the sun often shines bright, but shadows lingered in every corner of my home. As I stand on the threshold of my past, the familiar sense of my childhood penetrate my senses, distant whispers of lavender from my mother's garden mixing with the acrid aroma of burnt meals, a constant reminder of the tempest that brewed beneath our roof. My childhood was a tapestry woven with love and fear, a delicate balance that often tipped toward dread. Vividly, I recall my mother, her laughter a soothing melody, always nurturing my younger brother Marcus and me with her warmth and determination. Life with her felt like a sunflower stretching toward a clear blue sky. Yet my father, despite his hard work and efforts to provide, often cast a long shadow over our household. His anger loomed like a storm cloud, ready to unleash fury at the slightest provocation, and I learned early on to tread carefully in his presence. It was as if there were invisible strings connecting me to moments of strife, the raucous echoes of my father's temper resonating in my bones. I can still hear the echoes of that one fateful evening when Marcus, with his boyish curiosity, accidentally knocked over a precious vase, a family heirloom that my father cherished. I remember the sickening sound of shattering porcelain reverberating through the house like a gunshot, each fragment symbolizing the tenuous grasp we had on stability. My heart raced, pounding like a wild drum in my chest as my father exploded with rage, his face turning a shade of crimson. I could almost feel the heat radiating from him, enveloping the room in a stifling haze of volatility. My little brother shrank under the weight of his fury, his small frame becoming smaller, retreating into the shadow of our father's wrath. "Do you have any idea how much that cost?" my father bellowed, his voice slicing through the air like a knife. I remember standing there, frozen in fear, wishing I could become invisible, hidden behind the walls that I felt somehow yearned for forgiveness that was never rendered. "You're always so careless. What have I told you about being clumsy?" "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to," Marcus stammered, tears welling in his innocent eyes, reflecting the shattered pieces of the vase on the floor. "It doesn't matter if you meant to or not. You ruined something that can never be replaced." My father's outburst echoed in my mind, a barrage of shame falling upon Marcus, each word feeling like a physical blow. I gritted my teeth, the heat of helplessness rising within me in tandem with my father's anger. I had always been the invisible observer in our family, a silent witness to the storm that brewed within the walls of our home. It was moments like these that broke me, unraveling the protective facade I had built over the years. My father's temper was a beast, unpredictable and fierce, often leaving me feeling powerless in the wake of his rage. I wished fervently for the power to shield my brother from the tempest, but any attempt at bravery melted away in the face of my father's wrath. As time marched on, the cracks in our family grew wider, fissures that only deepened with each passing year. My grandfather, the one person who truly understood me and offered gentleness in the face of my father's wrath, fell ill and passed away. His departure shook the very foundation of our home, unsettling the delicate balance of our lives. The loss pushed the frail boundaries of my parents' marriage to their breaking point, as if the death of my grandfather had unleashed a torrent of unresolved resentment. "I can't believe you didn't check on him sooner," my father shouted one evening, his voice a low growl, filled with an anger that crackled in the air like a live wire. The living room felt like an arena, and I stood in the doorway, watching the debate unfold like an old film on repeat. "It's not my fault. You never listened to me when I said he was getting worse," my mother countered, her voice trembling but defiant as she clenched her fists at her sides. Each accusation hung in the air, suffocating, and I could see the weight of the world pressing down on both of them. "Vigilant enough, you wouldn't know vigilance if it hit you in the face. Stop it, just stop it." I burst into the room, my heart pounding in my chest as my voice, previously restrained, escaped like a caged bird finally freed. "You need to stop fighting. It was no one's fault." The words seemed to ring emptily against the walls that absorbed our quarrels. My father's gaze snapped toward me, sharp as broken glass. "You should know your place, girl. This is between your mother and me. You think you can just barge in here and—" "Stop, don't talk to her like that." My voice trembled, laced with an unfamiliar strength. Those words, though spoken with fear, felt like a revelation surging within me, igniting a spark I hadn't known existed. The air grew thick, charged with the tension of unleashed emotions. In that moment, I felt as if I were caught in a cyclone, spinning among the chaos. My father's contemptuous laugh hurt my ears, sharp and cruel, as if stripping away my newfound confidence. "And what will you do about it? You think your juvenile defiance means anything?" Standing there, heart racing and hands trembling, I felt a deep, simmering anger brewing inside me. "You do not get to treat her that way," I shouted, my voice drowning out the cacophony of bitterness that filled the room. Silence followed, heavy and oppressive, as the room frozen around us like a photograph suspended in time. I saw my mother's eyes widen with shock, confusion dawning in her expression, while my brother peeked from the hallway, uncertainty written on his small face. My father's reaction was instantaneous, a fiery rage igniting in his eyes as he advanced a step toward me, a dark predator locking its gaze on prey. "Do you want to talk back to me, girl? Is that what you want?" The venom in his words pierced through me, leaving a stinging ache blooming in my chest. I wanted to retreat, to pull back into that bubble of cowardice I had lived in for so long. But standing there, I felt an odd mix of bravery and desperation coursing through my veins, igniting a flame that overshadowed the crippling fear. He was not the man I wanted him to be, hadn't been for a long time. You just don't get it, do you? I spat out, every word an act of rebellion against the whispers of my childhood that warned me to stay silent. You think rage is strength. You think your anger gives you power? Well, it does, it only makes you small. Those words hung in the air, and as my father's face contorted in rage, I felt the cracks in our family widen, grow into voids from which nothing could ever be repaired. His breath came in ragged gasps, red pulsing veins visible in his temples like ropes pulled taut. The wall behind him seemed to fade, a barrier between the storm inside him and the chaotic tempest swirling in my heart. Get out. He growled, his voice low and dangerous, but I stood my ground, defiance raging in my chest. No, I am tired of running and hiding. I want the truth. I want to stop being afraid every time you come home. My voice wavered, but in the depths of my spirit, a fierce resolve took shape. His laughter echoed in the hateful silence like rusted machinery, cruel and mocking. Then let me show you what happens when you defy me. In that moment, I felt a wave of realization crash over me, the clarity breaking like a dam. I was no longer just a scared girl trying to shield her brother or mother from the turmoil. No, this was about me reclaiming my voice, no more the passive observer in a warped show of broken relationships. That night, I finally allowed the tears to flow, surrendering to the hurt that had racked my heart for far too long, pushing the emotions, the fear and frustration out of hiding like the steam from a boiling kettle. It flowed down my cheeks, warm and stinging, a new cocktail of sorrow and anger mixed with a transformative clarity. For the first time, I realized that clarity came as a double-edged sword. An unfamiliar fire ignited within me, stoking the embers of desire for revenge. Revenge against the years of silence, against every cruel word and blow that had sparked the flames of my father's rage. I was done being the silent observer in this dysfunctional world of ours, and as I sunk into an ocean of grief and frustration, I also embraced the wild stirrings of rebellion inside me. Like a coiled spring, I was ready to break free, to rise from the ashes of that broken home and reclaim everything that had been torn from me. In those precious moments of clarity, I began to form a plan. My father would never see it coming. I could feel it in the marrow of my bones. My past would pave the way for my reckoning. With every fragmented memory, every scar he had inflicted upon us, I could craft my revenge, and thus the story of Elaine Hartman, the girl who once stood paralyzed in fear, began to evolve into a tale of empowerment and retribution. The sun could shine bright, but now I would no longer allow shadows to linger in their corners. I would hunt them down one by one until I reclaimed the light that was stolen from me. The moment hung thick in the air, suffocating yet electrifying. I could feel the weight of the unspoken looming like a gathered storm, each breath feeling heavier as I imagined the reckoning primed to unfold in the confines of our living room. My parents entered, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension, oblivious to the tempest that raged behind my calm facade. The pale light from the overhead fixture shimmered against the polished wood of the table, creating long shadows that stretched like accusing fingers toward my father. The room echoed with the faint hum of the air conditioner, but all I could hear was my heart racing, thrumming like a war drum in my ears. This was it, the culmination of all those sleepless nights and aching revelations, the moment I had orchestrated for weeks. I had to maintain my composure, but the anticipation was almost unbearable. Thank you for coming, I began, my voice steady yet laced with an excitement I could hardly contain. I know things have been different since Grandpa passed, and I wanted us to discuss his belongings. There's a lot we can learn from our family's past. I deliberately kept the tone light, feigning a casual interest that I hoped would cushion the impending shock but really served to hide the fire raging within me. My mother nodded, a hint of suspicion flickering in her eyes. My father, on the other hand, simply grunted, his demeanor dismissive as if he saw the entire discussion as another burden to bear. This better not be another one of your sentimental nonsense sessions, he retorted, waving a hand as if he could brush away my intentions. The familiar pang of resentment clawed at me, but I swallowed it down. I would show him, I would make him face the truth. Just please hear me out, I said, injecting a note of urgency into my tone. I pressed the play button on the tablet, its screen lighting up in stark contrast to the dimness of the room. The first audio recording crackled to life, and my heart leaped into my throat, the sound of my father's voice washing over us like a tidal wave. Why can't you do anything right? You're such a disappointment. The words pierced the silence, sharp and cruel, fragments of our history pouring forth, aching with truth. I glanced at my mother, her eyes widened and her lips pressed together in tight disbelief. Could she really not have noticed it before? Every degrading syllable was like a knife twisting in my chest, a wound that had festered for so long. Turn that off, my father exclaimed, his voice strangled, panic creeping into his anger, yet I didn't stop. I kept watching him, my heart swelling with righteous fury. This was for every moment he had belittled us, every whisper of shame he had cast over our lives, a darkness that had seeped into our very souls. Please just listen, I said, my voice filling the void he was trying to create. Another recording began, featuring his tightly coiled rage, all directed at me without a hint of mercy. You're not as clever as you think you are, you'll never amount to anything. The disdain dripped from each syllable, and I felt my mother's hand twitch next to me, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the edge of the couch. As the echoes of his past comments reverberated against the walls, I watched my father's composure fracture. His bravado began to crumble, replaced by raw vulnerability. Shut it off, he shouted, his face flushed and brows knit together in desperation. Now the storm had arisen and I stood resolute at its eye. Why should I? I challenged, my courage surging forth like a tidal wave. This is the truth, this is who you are, it is time for everyone to see it. My voice trembled, but I didn't back down. The realization, the cathartic release of long-held pain bubbled over into strength. Elaine, stop this. My mother pleaded, her tone a mixture of fear and urgency, but as I looked into her eyes, I saw a glimmer of acknowledgement, a flicker of understanding that she too had been trapped beneath the weight of his words. No, Mom. It is time that you hear it, time you see what he has done to us. The tension in the room escalated, morphing into something palpable. I pressed play again, another recording flooding the air, the crude insults blending seamlessly into an overarching theme of manipulation and power. You are nothing without me, I am your only chance at a real life. My heart pounded in my chest, each heartbeat echoing the frustrations I had carried for too long. I was drowning in the depths of betrayal and rage, but now I was also burning with the fire of liberation. My father's mask was slipping away, revealing the coward beneath the tyrant. Elaine, you do not understand. This is not the way to handle things, he gasped, his voice barely above a whisper now, the venom of his past cowardice giving way to panic. I understand perfectly, I snapped back. I've understood for years. You think you can dominate us with your fear and your words, but those days are over, we are not your puppets. My mother's expression shifted, the shock of the recordings tightening the knots of realization within her. Her shoulders squared slightly as she sat up straighter. You need to listen to your daughter, she said, her voice trembling but gaining strength as she turned toward my father, her gaze steely. You have hurt us, you have hurt me more than you will ever know. He recoiled, and for a moment the air thickened with his shock. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. It was difficult seeing him laid bare like this, stripped of his facade, almost. My love, please, he said, desperation melding into his tone as if he expected his charm to work where truth had failed. You have to understand, I was trying to teach you, all of this was for your own good. Your good? I mocked, the bitterness lacing my words. You mean your twisted version of good, one that has kept us imprisoned in fear? My gaze locked onto his, refusing to let go, the walls of his control crumbling before my eyes. I never meant to hurt you, he protested, his voice faltering now. These were just lessons. They were not lessons, they were scars, I hissed, my voice low and resonant. I could feel my heart racing, a mix of exhilaration and nervousness coursing through me. The realization that I was dismantling years of emotional torture felt like standing on a precipice, teetering on the edge of something monumental. Elaine, I want to understand, I want to fix this, my father pleaded, the vulnerability in his voice stark and raw, but even in that moment a dark shadow loomed in the back of my mind. There was a lifetime of anger simmering beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. You don't get to judge what was wrong or right. Not anymore, I replied, my voice firm. Your version of love has been twisted into a weapon, but we're not going to let it hurt us anymore, we're reclaiming our lives. I pressed pause, the ambient silence left hanging in the air like a ripe fruit ready to fall. I had turned the tables, finally unveiling the truth I had painstakingly gathered. The storm had erupted into the open, and nothing could stop the deluge of feelings, each one bursting forth like a cascade of rain. Do you see what he has done? I asked my mother, my voice softer now, tinged with an earnest plea. You have to accept that he is not who you thought he was. You deserve to realize it, too. Tears brimmed in her eyes, the impact of the recordings hitting her like a tidal wave. I could see the cracks forming in her denial, the years of silent suffering processing in real time. She had been trapped far too long, caught in the shadows of his control. I never wanted to believe it, my mother admitted, her voice thick with emotion. But you are right, I've buried this pain for so long, I'm scared. You do not have to be scared anymore, I said, reaching out for her hand, the tactile connection grounding us both. It's time to break free together. The silence that followed was deafening, a sacred space where healing could begin. It felt like the echoes of the past were dissipating, storm clouds parting to reveal the sunlight breaking through the darkness that had stretched over us for too long. And in that stillness, the possibility of a new beginning blossomed, a fragile yet undeniable hope. We stood on the edge of history, bleeding old wounds while recognizing the power that lay within us. This time, there would be no complacency. This time, we would claim our voices and forge a new path. Let's finish what we started, I breathed deeply, empowered by the shared knowledge of truth. And in that moment, I saw a flicker in my mother's determination, the rising tide of her strength. And as for my father, the facade had finally shattered, revealing the depths of his darkness. The revelations would be the catalyst to start anew, and I could only hope it would lead us finally into the light. That evening felt surreal, the atmosphere electric with change and raw emotion. The air was thick with unspoken words, the kind that had hung above our heads for years, waiting for the right moment to be dragged into the light. As my mother spoke with newfound authority, I could see the spark of recognition igniting in my father's eyes, the shame washing over him like a cool wave on a scorching day. I had never seen him like this before, vulnerable, unsure of how to respond to the reality he had overlooked for so long. His back, which usually bore the weight of arrogance, slumped a little, as though admitting defeat to the truths that surged forth from my mother's heart. The dining table, a solid oaken fortress that had once been a battleground for arguments, became a sanctuary for honest conversation. I could see the intricate grain of the wood reflecting the afternoon sun, but it felt too insignificant compared to the deep emotions being stirred around us. My mother, usually soft and passive, poured out her heart like a river breaking its dam, unraveling the years of pent-up sorrow and resentment that had been tangled in her chest. "You made our home a war zone," she said, each word cutting through the air like a knife, her voice steady yet filled with the weight of pain. The way she spoke with such conviction was like watching a butterfly emerge from its chrysalis. Goosebumps prickled my skin as I felt the weight of her sadness penetrate my own heart, when I had long since attuned to the unrelenting turmoil. She continued, the cadence of her voice rising and falling like the tide. "There were countless nights I spent in fear, afraid that love and respect were luxuries I did not deserve. You took our laughter and turned it into whispers." Each word dug deeper into me, roots of empathy reaching out and intertwining with my own memories. I had spent years burying my feelings, trying to navigate this landscape of deceit and absence. But now the soil was being turned, and I grew convinced the healing process had taken root. I closed my eyes momentarily, feeling grateful for the truth blooming, a fragile flower unfurling in the bleakness of our family history. As I opened them again, I caught a glimpse of Marcus beside me, his gaze transfixed as he listened, the change within him palpable. It was stunning to witness. Our mother's newfound courage seemed to act as a catalyst, igniting something dormant within him. "Mom," he faltered, but the resolve found in my mother's fierce honesty seemed to supply him with the strength he needed. "I felt invisible," he uttered softly, his voice trembling slightly, an air of vulnerability wrapping around him like a cloak. Each word was laced with the bitterness of suppressed anguish. "You treated us like we were weak, like we could not handle the truth." His words cut through the room, the tension thickening as they settled like an uninvited guest. My father's gaze shifted slowly between his children, recognition dawning on him, realization etched across his features like a stone carving, each line representing moments he could no longer deny. I glanced at his hands, which were clenched tightly on the table. Did he know that for too long he had been both our protector and our captor, wielding love like a weapon? A memory flickered through my mind, the nights where our laughter faded to whispers, where our dreams felt stifled beneath the weight of his anger. Each recollection was like a long-forgotten album being dusted off, the pages unveiling faces I hardly recognized anymore, faces full of joy, curiosity, and life before darkness crept in. The walls that had stood high and impenetrable for years were beginning to crumble. I could feel the poisonous grip of the past weakening its hold, its power fracturing under the light of our shared truths. This was our moment, no longer shackled by resentment, we had the chance to reclaim our family. The confrontation had unearthed emotions we had all buried deep within, yet here they were, raw, unfiltered, and pulsing with life. Taking a deep breath, my father's chest heaved, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, reflecting the raw vulnerability that nestled in the corners of his once unyielding heart. "I did not realize the extent of my actions," he finally admitted, the words struggling to escape his throat, thick with emotion. "I saw only what I wanted to see." Each syllable felt laden with the weight of years lost. It hung in the air like the final note of a bitter song he had sung repeatedly, oblivious to the discord. I could feel my heart racing, the liberation of truth bursting free, igniting a fire within me that I had never known could exist. It felt like time itself was suspended, each tick of the clock amplifying the significance of this metamorphosis. The wounds were still raw, but they began to ache less, replaced by something hot and promising, like the scent of rain-soaked earth blooming after a drought. "This is not just about avenging the past," I finally found my voice, surprising myself with its strength. "This is about breaking this cycle of violence and pain for all of us. It's about healing." The weight of those words seemed to linger in the air, wrapping around us like a warm embrace, as if the room itself was saying yes, yes. There was a flicker of understanding behind my father's eyes. It was as though I had pierced through the hardened armor he wore. Perhaps he was finally grasping what we had so desperately needed him to see: a family cannot flourish when fear rules the heart. My mother especially was not meant to feel like a casualty of war in her own home. In that moment, I was no longer just a daughter seeking revenge, but a catalyst for healing and reclamation, a sudden jolt of clarity surging through me. "Do you even understand how we felt?" I pressed, not wanting him to retreat into his old defenses. "We lived under your shadow for so long, always wondering if today would be the day your moods changed without warning." It was like walking on eggshells, never knowing if the next step would shatter everything. Tension coiled around us like a tight spring as he seemed to wrestle with my words, the gravity of the moment hanging heavily in the air. I thought I was protecting you," he finally murmured, his voice a mere whisper, barely breaking the barrier between us. "But I see now that I was only protecting myself." The pain in his eyes spoke volumes, layers of regret slowly unraveling. "Protecting yourself from what?" Marcus interjected, his voice rising above the tremors of uncertainty. "From the truth, from seeing us, we deserved more than to be mere shadows in your life." The emotion in his words struck me deeply, like a drum beat that resonated through my entire being. Each phrase was a reminder that we had sought to exist in a world that had pushed us to the margins. The silence that followed was heavy, pulsating like a drum in the chest of our home. I could feel doubt creep into the corners of his mind, battling against the fierce glimmers of reflection. Would he fight against this change or let it unfold like the petals of a flower? "I can't change the past," my father eventually said, his voice breaking, the bitterness seeping into his words like salt on an open wound. "But I can try to make it right from here on out." The admission was monumental, and despite the hurt and anger that had festered for years, a fragile thread of hope began to weave its way into our conversation. You have to want it, though, I said softly, the resolve still coursing through me but tempered by the urgency of understanding. We can't keep pretending anymore. It's not enough to just say the words, Dad, they have to mean something. That's fair, he agreed, his voice quiet but steady, mirroring the genuine change that seemed to be taking root. I know it's not enough, but I want to understand, I want to hear you both, and I want to do better. My heart softened at the admission, an unfamiliar warmth flooding through me at the idea of a new beginning. Then let's start by sharing everything, I suggested tentatively. Let's just talk, it's long overdue. What are you thinking? Marcus asked, a hint of curiosity sparking in his eyes. It was a glimmer of hope shining through the darkness we had endured. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders as the realization set in that we had a chance now. Together, we could forge a new path, one built not from fear, but from understanding, acceptance, and love. Thinking, I paused, savoring the moment, every second heavy with potential. That we start with the truth, the whole truth, what we want, what we need, and what we fear, together. I can do that, he replied, his gaze earnest. I promise I will listen. And in that moment, as the shadows of our past began to dissolve in the light of this newfound hope, I was filled with the bittersweet anticipation of the journey ahead. It would not always be easy, these wounds were still fresh, and we had years ahead of challenges to confront together. But tonight marked a beginning, the moment of reckoning where we stood at the precipice of change, ready to leap into an unknown future, hand in hand, heart to heart as the evening drew on. The conversation stretched like time had magically slowed, each word a thread woven into the fabric of our family. The air in the dining room felt charged, vibrant with the energy of hope and fear mingling together. With the sun dipping below the horizon, the golden light from the last rays painted soft shadows across the table, illuminating the faces of people who had lived with burdens too long unspoken. I could almost feel the warmth seep into my skin, both comforting and terrifying. My heart raced with anticipation as I watched my mother lean forward, her hands cradled around the warmth of her teacup. The soft clinking sound of delicate china broke the still air, punctuating the moment before she spoke. I have something to say, something I need to express, she began, her voice steady but soft, like a clear stream breaking through ice. I felt a lump in my throat as I braced myself for what was to come. I have endured so much for so long, she continued, her gaze searching ours, finding strength in the connection. I've felt suffocated within the confines of our family dynamics, as if everyone around me needed to stay small to avoid stepping on someone's toes. But let me be clear, I no longer want to live in that shadow. Her courage flowed from her like a tide, washing over the room, and I could feel it pulling at my own fears, coaxing them into the light. The walls of the house seemed to lean closer, eager to absorb her words, as if even they understood the weight that had to be lifted. Self-love, she said slowly, almost hesitantly. It feels like a foreign concept after years of living beneath your father's shadow. She was looking at him now, her gaze fierce yet tender, a fierce softness that spoke of years of unvoiced resentment and muted dreams. But I deserve respect just like anyone else, she declared, her voice rising like the crescendo of a symphony filling the room. The resolve in her eyes burned brightly, a beacon illuminating the dark corners we previously avoided. I felt a lump forming in my throat as I glanced at my father, whose head was bowed in reflection. There was an air of humility about him that I had never witnessed, a sincerity that tugged at my heartstrings. I see that now, he finally said, the tremor in his voice hinting at sincere remorse. I want to change, I know I need to. His admission hung in the air, and it was like the moment the first drop of rain falls on parched earth. It wasn't a promise, but it was just enough, a flicker of hope igniting warmth within me. Those words filled the silence around us with the possibility of a dawning tomorrow, one where wounds could heal and love could flourish again. As my eyes flickered to Marcus, I caught the flicker of emotion playing in the depths of his bright eyes. His youthful innocence mixed with a burgeoning strength, a symbol of the hope I had for all of us. This was the moment we had all longed for, the moment we had dared to dream of, the hope of changing the narrative of our lives, a work of art repainted on the canvas of family. Mom, I love you, he said suddenly, breaking the tense silence. There was an eagerness in his voice, a hopeful vibration that I could feel inside my chest. You deserve this, you deserve to stand tall, and I want that for you. His sincerity echoed in my heart, and I realized then just how far we had come. If the family we were before had been broken, then the family we could become held the promise of rebirth. Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know, my mother replied, her voice thick with emotion. There was a glimmer in her eyes, a shine that hadn't been there for so long, and it was beautiful to witness. In that moment, I felt as though the air had become charged with new possibilities, sparking a revolution within the very heart of our family. For the first time, my father dared to take a breath and admit his fallibility. I know I hurt you all, he murmured, his gaze flitting between us, vulnerability spilling from every word. I'm so sorry, I realize now that my past actions created a rift that needed light, the very light that I was unwilling to let in. The words came heavy and slow, like stones being dropped into a still pond, creating ripples that reached far beyond the surface. I could see the remorse etched in his features, the pain of realization battling against years of stubbornness. It felt exhilarating, yet terrifying, like standing on the edge of an unknown cliff, but I could not look away. The change doesn't happen overnight, he cautioned, moving his hands as if trying to mold the very air around us. I will need your understanding and your patience as I navigate this journey. I believe in you, I said softly, a tender flame igniting in my chest. The intensity of the moment enveloped us, and I could feel my mother's hand brushing against my arm, grounding me. You've taken the first step, and that's all any of us could ask for. We're in this together. Yes, together, Marcus echoed, a voice filled with youthful optimism, and I watched as he leaned back in his chair, his shoulders seeming to lift slightly. A weight had started to dissipate like clouds scattering before the sun. We didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but the present felt suffused with light, a sunbeam piercing through the fog of our past. After that night, I began to observe the slow, delicate rebuilding of our family, each day a brushstroke in a larger painting. My mother was no longer relegated to the shadows. She reclaimed her presence, effortlessly commanding the room when she walked in. Each time I saw her assert herself, it was like watching the gentle unfolding of a blossom. I would catch her in moments of laughter, those soft sounds like the tinkling of tiny bells that resonated with joy and lightness. They beautifully countered the solemn echoes of the past. She started vocally advocating for herself, marking her territory in every space she entered. I saw her pursue her own passions again, trying her hands at pottery and dance, an exploration that breathed new colors into her life. At school, Marcus transformed from the invisible boy who drifted through hallways into an outspoken young man whose voice cracked through the stillness. He joined clubs that encouraged open expression, pouring his heart into everything he did. I watched with pride as he participated without hesitation, his words flowing freely, painting dreams in bold, beautiful strokes. The world around him began reflecting the passion he poured into every conversation, and it helped me find my voice too. My father embarked on a path to redemption, attending support groups like a solemn traveler seeking clarity. The late-night discussions meant he would come home exhausted but wiser, often apologizing for his past missteps with a humility that made my heart swell. Each time I saw the spark of desire to understand the impact of his actions light up his eyes, hope kindled anew in me. He was seeking therapy as he began to adopt a whole new way of communicating with us, transforming his silence into active encouragement. The transformation was not instantaneous, nor was it free of challenges, as there were still whispers of old habits lingering like shadows that wouldn't disappear easily. I found myself caught in moments of anger, the remnants of hurt rising within me like storm clouds on a summer afternoon. But we faced those storms together, learning to communicate openly whenever doubts arose. With time, those clouds became less daunting, dissolving more swiftly as we braved the path together, each step bringing us closer to the light again. We made it through those challenges, proving that trust, once broken, could be mended with patience and a willingness to change. It was clear that the revenge I sought from the shadows of the past had not only served justice, but had opened a door to healing instead of destruction. As I reflect on that moment now, I realize my heart was never aimed at vengeance. The true catharsis was in the release, the shedding of layers of trauma that had long suffocated our love. Family can be a source of strength, but only when we dare to confront the shadows, holding each other accountable. Finally, we had the courage to address the pains of yesterday with a tenacity fueled by love. That night, when my mother finally spoke her truth, was the day we emerged from the chrysalis of denial and fear. In the end, our love was reborn amid the broken pieces, strong enough to endure anything life could throw at us. As we forged ahead, we built something infinitely stronger than what we had lost, the promise of a brighter future, a family sculpted from the ashes of a troubled past, blooming where we once wilted.